Episode 1. N0. Charlie Stratford Riggs and Vector Meldrew. NFT First Edition. First NFT Edition. November 2022. Written by Charlie Stratford Riggs. Art by Vector Meldrew. Copyright 2022 Charlie Stratford Riggs and Vector Meldrew. Some rights reserved. Broadside Episode 1 by Charlie Stratford REX and Vector Meldrew is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial 4.0 International License. Based on a work, BroadsideNFT. Learn more about permissions beyond the scope of this license at BroadsideNFT. To create, omit new or derivative broadside stories or art yourself for commercial purposes, please visit BroadsideNFT for terms and conditions. Thank you. You are what you share. BroadsideNFT. https://twitter.com/BroadsideNFT. Friday, July 10th, 2037. 10 days before, Drew stared into the mouth of the machine, trying not to think about the consequences. Its red-hot core glowered back. Fixing 3D printers by hand was dangerous. People lost fingers, or worse, but the software wasn't letting Drew in. The Flexwork dashboard said they had 15 minutes to get this thing back online. One more bad review and their Flexwork account would be deactivated. If that happened, Drew wouldn't make rent this month. As a 17-year-old with little work experience, from a family where no one had a full-time job, in a country with 45% unemployment, Drew was out of options. So, they took a breath, leaned forward, and stuck their arm in. Drew reached into the machine's hot central chamber. It smelled like a burning tire. Knots of wire twisted between the sharp metal extruder arms, either side of them. The printer was top of the line. Drew noticed as they tried not to get their hand burned off the brand new Proto 3 dome. What Drew lived, people didn't have printers this nice. It was as large as a washing machine. This model could print anything from luxury linens to synthetic living tissue. If Drew ever got to own one, they'd print Dad that medication he needed, not that he'd take it. Drew dug through the printer's guts, searching for the problem, careful not to touch anything hot. Their legs left the floor as they leaned in. Their guess was something was clogging the main filament tube. Drew hung upside down, trying to reach it. The glowing printer bed warmed Drew's face as they stretched past it. If they touched it, third-degree burns were all but guaranteed. The side of the machine dug into their stomach, making it hard to breathe. Then their hand touched something, a hard, calcified lump. Drew clawed at it, struggling for purchase, closing their grip around it. "Excuse me," bellowed an unfamiliar voice. Drew recalled in shock, losing their grip, smacking their head on the extruder arm above. Pain shot through their skull as they pulled themselves up. "Hello, excuse me," snapped the voice again. Drew heaved himself out of the machine, clutching their stinging hand. A woman in her 20s wearing expensive yoga clothes stood before Drew. She did not look happy. Drew blinked open Lumen OS, their neural operating system. Some people still didn't like the idea of a chip in their head beaming a digital layer of information over reality. Drew couldn't remember life without it. Icons and info bubbles appeared to Drew, causing their eyes to shift through a spectrum of colors and shapes, letting others know Lumen OS was on. The woman's name was Jane Stratt. She was the client. She worked at Proto, which explained the state-of-art printer. But Drew didn't have time to read her bio. Flexworks said there was 10 minutes left to finish the job. "Exactly how much longer do you think you'll be?" Jane asked. "Every printer in the house is connected to this main unit. I can't print food, work, stuff, anything. Do you speak English?" Drew straightened up and turned to Jane, wiping the machine grease from their face as they took off their cap. Drew's short, colorful hair clashed with their digitally augmented eyes. Drew raised a striped eyebrow. Jane looked taken aback, but Drew was used to this. "You didn't see a lot of teenagers doing printer repair." "I dunno, ma'am. Your filament tube is jammed up pretty good," Drew answered with a smile, doing their best to be client-facing as per the instructions in all the Flexwork training videos. Good news is there's a backdoor admin for this model. Getting in there would speed things up. Your housekeeper didn't know the password. Do you know it? Your parents' home? What they? Maybe. Drew trailed off. Jane looked like she had been slapped. My parents. This is my house. Look, this is new. I don't know about any bank or admin who even uses passwords anymore. Jane took a breath, trying to remain calm. Listen, I need to go. You people have been out here twice this month already. I need this back online tonight, or no tip. Comprehend? Drew's smile vanished. They hadn't mean to insult Jane and needed this job. But you people, no tip and comprehend, all in the same breath. Dios mío. Drew narrowed their eyes. Jane took a step forward and gently put her hands together, as if praying. I really need this done, and you need me to give you a good review, right? Jane asked softly. So, let's help each other out. Drew looked down at Jane's perfectly manicured hands, and then at their own greasy fists, cut and burned from endless hours fixing printers. Drew's stomach growled a reminder they hadn't eaten yet. Taking a breath, Drew forced a cheery nod. Jane smiled curtly, turned, and marched out. Drew watched her go. It was hard to believe a woman just a few years older than them had a place like this. Even the utility room had a view. Jane's townhouse stood high on a hill in San Francisco's No Valley neighborhood, looking out at the bar graph of glass and neon downtown. The skyline was alive, buildings covered in exotic vegetation and tapestries of digital displays glowed. Dynamic skyscrapers oscillated and rippled. Holographic advertisements and road signs floated around the city. Like wraiths, panicked drones buzzed over the commuter traffic. A jagged glass spike dominated it all, belittling both the Transamerica Pyramid it mimicked and the Salesforce Tower it mocked. Prona HQ represented everything people either loved or hated about 2030 Seconds America. For Drew, it was just another giant company they did badly paid temporary work for. Places like this made them feel dead inside. The world Jane occupied, this house and that skyline, were about as accessible to Drew as the lump in the printer, a lump they now had 6 minutes left to retrieve. Drew leaned back in, connecting their Lumen OS interface to the 3D. They opened the login screen and burrowed back down to the filament tube. They remembered something Dad had given them, an application called brute force that found passwords. He built it himself. Wasn't exactly legal. It was based on some old program from the turn of the century he used as a kid. It didn't work on most modern systems, but Drew booted it up anyway. Tinkering with obscure technology was the only thing they really had in common. That avoided most other subjects, like why Drew and their brother had to cover the rent so often, or what really happened to Mom. It was either because brute force was so outdated, or because the printer was so new. But the app opened, undetected. It began trying the endless number of possible combinations to the admin panel. It estimated it would take 4 hours to crack the password. Drew panicked. They had 5 minutes. Drew closed the app and jammed a hand back into the machine. As Drew dug around, a phone icon appeared, illuminating the darkness. As it rang, it was Carlos, their older brother. "Sup?" Drew said, nodding to answer. "We need you," said Carlos. "We're outside." "What?" "I'm working," Drew objected. "What for?" "Fins out," he replied. "It's a league game. This is it, Drew." Drew pulled himself out of the machine, taking this news in. The world around him seemed to fall away. Nothing was more important right now than making the rent. Nothing except Broadside. If they won a league game, the rent would be covered, and then some. If they did well, they could even make the Bay Area finals. That would change everything. Carlos had never asked Drew to play a league game before. It wasn't even legal. Technically, what with Drew being a junior and all, they felt their chests tense. It was too risky. But my gear, I only got gloves. Everything's at home. I got it. There's no time, said Carlos. He was right. Drew looked into the printer. 3 minutes left to finish the job. The lump at the bottom of the machine suddenly seemed like it was miles away. Drew looked out at the skyline again. "This is our shot, Drew. Yes or no?" Drew let himself out the back so as not to alert Jane, creeping around the side of the house with their tube bag. They were strafing across the front lawn when they heard Jane yell from the front door. They locked eyes. Drew froze. Drew thought for a second about the scathing review Jane would leave for rugging her on this job. and what that meant for their future as a flex worker. But it was too late. Drew was already outside, so they ran. Jane started to run too. As Drew hit the pavement, Carlos and his best friend Riz lurched up in the self-driving shared car. The vehicle didn't look roadworthy because of their social credit score in Lumen OS. The shared car system always sent Drew and Carlos the lowliest possible hoopties, but this thing didn't look like it would make it down the hill. The radio was tuned into Carlos' favorite station, Culture Co. 3D bass music bumped from the grimy little pod as it rolled to a stop, with waves of sound visibly disrupting the air. Jane shouted something, but it was lost under the din. Drew dived into the shared car as his door switched open. A small tinfoil square with a QR code on it dropped from their bag onto the sidewalk, an NFT holotag, the chip that could transmit non-fungible information, in this case, a custom 3D holographic image of Drew in their broadside armor. Drew thought about retrieving it. It was their second to last one, and they couldn't afford to mint any more poses. But Jane was too close. Go, Drew shouted. The car door swished shut as it pulled away, tires squealing. Adrenaline pounded through Drew's chest. This was insanity, but it felt good. Drew felt alive. Carlos increased the car's speed as much as the user interface would let him. Drew looked back at Jane, standing in the street, staring daggers after them as she bent down to pick up Drew's NFT holotag. That was not good, but the tag wasn't connected to their real Lumen OS ID. Drew kept Broadside stuff in a separate wallet. Jane shrank as they sped down towards the glowing skyline, the 3D bass music leaving ripples of sound in their wake. Then Drew noticed something else. Behind Jane's house, on the other side of the valley, the ramshackle silhouette of the South San Francisco slum towers reached into the sky like broken fingers. If they won tonight's game, their financial troubles would be over. If they lost, Drew knew the slums was where they would end up. Carlos and Riz crashed through the doors of the warehouse like bandits, entering the saloon. Stickers and graffiti covered their thin armor suits, known in the game as bone suits. The bone suits were gunmetal gray, with the last remains of a blue and pink paint job clinging on. The armor was scratched and shredded, as if fashioned from pieces of old skateboards. Scarf-shaped helmets covered their heads, but their eyes remained visible through their visors. Stenciled across their backs were the words, "Skeleton Crew." Drew trailed behind Carlos and Riz, struggling to get their helmet on, breathing hard. Drew couldn't get comfortable in this bone suit. It belonged to Finn, the official third member of Skeleton Crew, who had busted his knee. It was too small in some places and too big in others. The helmet didn't fit properly, and it smelled like old socks. Everything chafed. The only way to get the pants on was by leaving the fasteners undone at the back. Drew cursed Finn's narrow ass, but it would all be worth it. Drew adjusted their suit and caught up with the others, taking in the surroundings. It was Drew's first time on this course the junior league played, in a smaller space across town. Didn't matter though. They watched Carlos, Riz, and Finn play here so many times they could run this map with their eyes shut. But they'd never actually been down here before in the pit. The vastness of the arena was intimidating. A handful of kids were posted up high the bleachers where Drew usually sat. Beams of late afternoon, sun streamed down from skylights. The faint smell of burnt rubber and sweat hung in the air. Obstacles with unlikely geometry covered the floor. Platforms jutted from the walls at odd angles. It might have passed for an art exhibit or a paintball course, but there were no patrons or paint marks. Drew slowed up as Carlos and Riz stopped ahead. Two jagged forts stood on stilts at each end of the arena, facing each other across the maze of obstacles. Riz opened her visor, her eyes skittering across the field. She was 19 with wild curly hair and dark features. People always thought she and Carlos were a couple. They had been friends since they were kids and had forged a strong bond through Broadside. But it was purely platonic, low-key. Drew had always liked Riz. She was beautiful and a tough broadside. She had this vulnerable thing about her too. They never talked about it. But Carlos didn't like Drew crushing on Riz. Drew caught her looking back sometimes, though. "So what's the alpha? How we doing this?" Riz asked. Carlos lifted his visor. He was sleek and stony-faced, with the same pink blue and yellow luminous eyes and tan skin as Drew. He surveyed the terrain. Drew followed his gaze over to three shadows lurking inside the far fort. Head left, Carlos said to Riz. I got right. He turned to Drew, who nodded in approval at his plan. Shifting uncomfortably in the borrowed armor, I'll head down the middle and meet them head on, Drew offered, sounding hopeful. Carlos thought on this for a second before shaking his head. Nah. Cover us from the crow's nest, he said, and don't be getting all nervous. Drew looked up at the nest perched high on a support beam close to the roof of the arena, then back at their brother. They didn't like heights, had one too many bad falls last season. I'm not, Drew replied. It's just, you're smaller than we are, and I don't want them to figure out you're a junior. Carlos replied, which means you snipe, which means you post up there. Hey, Drew looked at him, hating it when he was right. It didn't matter how capable Drew was. Carlos was one of the best broadside players in the senior league. Drew was a punk kid lucky enough to call him their older brother, but at least Drew was here. A senior league game, and not even 18 yet. They would be banned so hard if the league found out. Carlos turned and walked on towards the fort closest to them. Fall in line for once, he muttered over his shoulder. You know these rich assholes got way more weapons and ammo than us. We only went by playing as a team. We do this and I could be looking at the pros next season. Like for real. You do get that, right? I get it, Drew answered. Seeing that Carlos was getting anxious, Drew knew what tonight meant for all of them if they won. Hey, Drew said. Carlos stopped and looked back. I also get what it means that you asked me to play tonight. Carlos, I won't let you down, bro. Carlos smiled and nodded. Bones up, he said, holding out a fist. Bones up, Drew replied, dapping him back. They both popped in their mouth guards. Drew followed Carlos and Riz up into the fort. Just then Luminous pinged, informing Drew that they had a new review on flex work from one Jane Stratton, and that their flex work account had been deactivated. Drew swiped the message away and looked at their bank balance. They had barely been able to afford enough non-fungible ammo to get through half a junior league game, never mind what they were about to attempt. It didn't matter. There was no going back. The only way out of their current problems, and the only way they might ever get to a better life, was to win this game. Inside the fort, glowing words flickered in the darkness. Welcome to Broadside, 2022-2037 by Pro. Connecting wallets, establishing perimeter. Rug Mob wants to play capture the flag. First team to capture the flag in the center of the arena wins. Accept. Reject. Carlos nodded accept. A fresh screen appeared in front of Skeleton Crew. On it were the three members of Rug Mob, the team in the opposite fort. They looked older to Drew, or at least bigger, or at least scarier. Carlos glanced over at Drew and slapped their helmet down so the skull completely hid their face. Drew peered out through the skull's eye holes at Rug Mob. The opposing team's bonesuits were box fresh, painted high-gloss metallic blue. There wasn't a dent or scratch in sight. They all had immaculate clothing too. Gray-level hoodies and super rare broadside camo patterns. Shirts from vintage. Seachiro artists a hot favorite with broadsiders right now. These were their clothes for fighting. Drew couldn't believe how relaxed they were. They hadn't even put their helmets on yet. The three members of Rug Mob couldn't have looked more different. The tallest was a huge corn-fed lump of brawn with a torso like an aircraft carrier, with immaculate eyeshadow, lipstick, and hair pinned up in a bun. Their full name was Siobhan, but everyone called them Shiv, on account of their blunt and brutal style of play. Next to Shiv stood Taki, a sinewy, whitefish Asian kid with long blonde hair and an icy stare. He wore eyeshadow and lipstick that matched Shiv's. Taki was the yin to Shiv's yang, a skilled sniper who could no-scope a kid at the opposite end of the arena, while Shiv was a battering ram, vicious and merciless at close range. They were an odd couple, but together, a complete weapon system with flawless makeup. Jason, Rug Mob's leader, was a different story. There was nothing non-binary about this guy. He was a tan jock with slick hair and jacked-up muscles. He was headstrong, hard-charging, and played dirty as Stone Cold douchebag. From what Drew had seen, other than having rich parents, Jason had got where he was in the lead by bending rules and barking orders. He was a strategist. He would hold the middle ground using Shiv and Taki's short and long-range abilities to achieve full-spectrum dominance on the field. He leaned into the camera, his trillion-cut gold grill filling the screen. Namaste, Addy. Betches. Sup? Carlos replied, avoiding eye contact. Jason eyed Riz through the feed. Hey, Rizwani, you gonna put up a real fight this time? Or turn your shot pads off? Like last time, my bonesuit was lagging. I told you. And it's just Riz? She replied, rendering armor. Glowing holographic skins of NFT armor stitched themselves together over their bone suits. Gamer tags, stats and health meters appeared above their heads. Carlos was Carl Offit and Riz was Ronzi. Most kids just used first names in the senior league getting ready to go fully doxxed if they were in the 1% lucky enough to turn pro. But Drew had signed in on a brand new guest account, and the temporary gamer tag they had chosen was War, HF or D. Drew didn't know why they picked it. It was the name of this old drum and bass song that Dad always used to play. A lot of people use aliases in the junior league. Rookie mistake. Shiv noticed first. War HF or D. That ain't a league tag. This is a noob account. Where's Finn? Shiv asked, Yo, who is this kid? Drew looked at Carlos. His shoulders slumped as he let out a frustrated sigh. Drew opened their mouth, instinctively wanting to answer Shiv, then closed it. If Rug Mob realized there was a junior on the field, Skeleton, Crew would forfeit before the game even begun. Drew never liked staying in Carlos' shadow, but losing would be worse. Way worse. Best to stay quiet and let him handle this. New words appeared. Skeleton Crew vs. Rug Mob. Activating map cams. Calibrating haptics. Rendering map. Finn janked his knee. Carlos replied, waving it away like it was nothing. We had to bring in a sub last minute is all. Carlos did his best to sell it. He always sounded so assertive to Drew, hard-nosed and broad-shouldered. People listened to him, respected him. Drew figured it would be cool, but from the look on Rug Mob's faces, it was clear that it was very far from cool. What are you trying to pull, bro? Jason demanded, spitting out his mouth guard to talk. This ain't regulation. You don't sub in a league game. Not with us, added Shiv. Nah, one that. Taki agreed, shaking his head. No freaking deal, no man, said Jason. Drew panicked. If Jason reported them, they were toast. Riz opened her mouth as if to protest, then bit her lip. New words scrolled overhead, glowing hot pink in the dark of the fort, rendering weapons. Drew looked down as a meager handful of NFT guns, grenades, and ammo appeared at their feet. It wasn't enough, but it was all they could afford. Drew looked back at the screen as an arsenal of weapons appeared at the Rug Mob fort. They must have swept the floor at the ammo shop. It was like Christmas morning over there. Jason glared back, loading NFT clips into NFT guns and snapping NFT guns into NFT holsters. Taki's bonesuit was groaning with exotic munitions. Shiv picked up a ballistic ball and chain that only a kid with their immense frame could lift. If it were real, it looked like a WW or naval mine on a leash. I said let him put a noob up against us. Shiv chuckled, looking at Drew with a smirk. I mean, look at this little snot, standing all wonky like a vertical tree. Look at these little ass weapons they bringing, yo. You use food stamps to get these. We're gonna teabag they sorry ass all over the map. Taki sniggered and bumped fists with Shiv. Jason looked at his teammates with a smile, thinking on this. All right, whatever. Shrugged Jason. What's your name, bruh? Drew's mind raced, their blood getting hot. They had to say something, but they promised Carlos they'd stay quiet. The league could not find out. Drew was underage, but teabagging. Vertical tree. Drew had to clap back. First off, I ain't your bruh, Drew said, squaring up to Jason through the camera, keeping their helmet and voice low. Secondly, Drew continued, turning to Shiv, your mom looks like a vertical tree. I ain't afraid of no rich brats from Marin. I got all I need right here to take care of you. It felt good, watching them recoil from the camera in shock. Not so great a split second later, when they all burst out laughing. Wait. This little runt can't even fit in a bone suit. And they out here trying to talk smack. Yo, are you serious, kid? Said Tack. Carlos motioned at Drew to back down, but now they were all laughing. Now, Drew was mad. How about I come for you first, honey? Drew growled back at Tacky. We'll see who's serious. The laughing stopped. Tacky glared. Jason nodded ominously. Then, teams readied their weapons as a countdown appeared. Broadside begins in 5. Jason studied Drew calmly. You really want to get on the wrong side of us? You sure about that? War. HF or D? 4. Don't push him. Carlos whispered to Drew. Bad idea. 3. Drew picked up a sniper rifle and looked back at Jason. Wrong side. I'm gonna be on every side of you. Dickhead. Jason's eyes bulged. Carlos hid his face in his hand. 2. Dickhead? Jason shouted from his screen. Kid, and that fool. Drew swiped away the screen before he could finish. It didn't matter how. Tough rug mobber. Drew had quit their job for this. The mark on their social credit score would be permanent. There was no going back. 1. The rest of the screens vanished. Skeleton crew crouched. Ready. Mouth. Guards in. Weapons cocked. Adrenaline rising. Visors down. Bones up. Carlos bellowed. Start. From then on out, everything was a blur. Drew leapt from the fort. Sniper rifle across their back. Their bone suit whirred into gear as they landed, absorbing the fall. They burst into a sprint, the bone suit enhancing their athletic abilities. Drew's heart thumped as scenery flew by. Riz darted left, brandishing a Uzi, the gecko grip on her bone suit, enabling her to run up the walls for a few seconds at a time. Carlos strafed to the right with a battle rifle. He bounded up a ramp onto a platform above. Drew, just below the crow's nest. Carlos narrowed his eyes at the 3 blue shadows weaving between the obstacles ahead. I see him. You got the shot, Drew, he said over Skeleton Crew's voice. Channel. Drew looked nervously at the crow's nest 20 feet above. Go. Carlos shouted. Are you scared of heights? Or are you a broadsider? Because you can't be both. Drew took a deep breath, engaged their bone suit, and sprang into the air. They landed shakily on the platform, legs wobbling like a newborn foal. They tried to ignore the drop below and focus, their breath fogging their visor. In the distance, they saw 3 shimmers of blue camo as Rug Mob advanced. From the other direction, Drew forgot the height, crouched, then aimed. Through the scope, Drew watched Jason leading Rug Mob through low ground, flitting between obstacles, aiming a laser rifle. Tacky was behind him with a giant nail gun. She followed, swinging the ballistic mace. Let's show these simps what's up. Rallied Jason. Sag and drag, baby. Bellowed Shiv. Slice and dice, man, replied Tacky. Slicing. Sure. Drew smiled. Around sliced Tacky's NFT nail gun clean in half. It burst into pixels and disappeared. Tacky froze in shock for a split second before he could dive into cover. That was all Drew needed. SHHH, man. The second bullet hit Tacky between the eyes, obliterating his digital helmet. The shot pads in his bone suit jolted him back onto the dirt floor. Tacky's power level fell to 0 as his digital layer of NFT armor flickered and disappeared. The words, War HF or D Snipes Tack 1, appeared overhead in big letters. A countdown above Tacky's head glowed, indicating he had 10 seconds before his NFT armor and weapons would respawn. Tacky sat up, cursing. His immaculate bone suit was now caked in wood chips and dirt from the warehouse floor. Drew looked down at Riz as she read the words projected overhead. She ran forward, victory emboldening her. I had. She shouted in Tacky's direction. You're in Skeleton Crew's house now. We told you. Thwan. Shiv barreled out of cover, putting all their weight behind the ball and chain, silencing Riz, swatting her high into the air. Drew watched Riz's NFT armor shatter as she was hurled upwards, sailing through the letters in the air that read S Home V Broadside's Ronzi, and began plummeting back to earth head first. Helpless, just before Riz hit the ground, airbags burst from all over her bone suit. She bounced along the floor unharmed, breathing a sigh of relief as the bags deflated back into her suit. Drew watched from the crow's nest as Jason and Shiv turned on. Carlos, guns blazing. The air was thick with tracer rounds, laser bolts, and sniper fire. Grenades rained down. Explosions rang out. Yet Carlos, one of the best defensive players in the Bay, dodged it all with ease. Drew aimed down into the carnage, trying to pick off Jason and Shiv. Adrenaline pounded behind Drew's eyes. They really didn't like heights. They adjusted their helmet, wiping the condensation from their visor. The game's graphics glitched out as they did so. LumenOS was playing up with all the moisture. Drew could still see the Broadsiders' real bone suits, enabling them to jump higher, run faster, and take nastier falls, but not the bright color, holographic NFT armor, no NFT weapons or explosions, no sound effects or game stats. They opened their visor and furiously rubbed their eyes until the system readjusted. The holographic armor, weapons, and explosions appeared again, a blanket of cartoon violence over reality. Drew watched as Shiv got too close to Carlos, close enough to hurl a slime grenade, a sticky ball of explosive goop which latched itself to his back. He tried to reach back and rip it off, but glad and S-Home Nate's Carlo 5. That was it. Drew jumped from the crow's nest as the word scrolled above. It was time to go in. Drew raced through the smoke toward Shiv's lumpy silhouette, staying low and out of sight, aiming the sniper rifle through the smokescreen, with one hand at the spot just in front of Shiv's head. Blay out. Wore HFD no scopes S-Home V. Drew smiled and kept moving, knowing better than to stay in one spot. They were gone before Shiv's body hit the floor. The smoke cleared. Drew could see the flag up ahead. Riz was back in the game and almost on it. Then Drew clocked Jason, taking aim at Riz from the left. Drew broke into a sprint as Jason unloaded. Laser bolts tore into Riz's digital armor. Drew watched Riz stumble straight into Tacky's line of sight. Tacky aimed the nail gun and scrunch. The giant nail buried itself in Riz's visor, prompting the shock pads in her bonsu to push her back. She fell to the ground with a thud. Taco nails Ronzi. The holographic nail and armor evaporated into pixels. Riz sat up, wondered. She punched the ground as her overhead countdown began. Drew crept up behind Riz and Carlos, staying in cover. It was down to Drew to keep Rug Mob away from the flag until their teammates could respond. They hurled the one slime grenade they had in Jason and Tacky's direction and leapt for cover behind a platform. The grenade exploded, narrowly missing them. Jason fired back from behind the platform, but Drew was already gone. Tacky peeked around the platform, half grinning, half pouting at Riz, who was still on the floor waiting to rejoin the game. Ooh, nailed in your own backyard. Tacky hissed. That's got it. Crack. The butt of Drew's sniper rifle slammed into Tacky's helmet. Wore HFD Broadside's Tack 1. Not as much as that, smirked Riz. Tacky fell for a third time as Drew trampled over him, firing at Jason. Tacky kicked a leg out, tripping Drew. This was technically a foul, as Tacky was still waiting to respond. Drew didn't have time to object as their face hit the ground. Drew rolled over, winded, wiping the dirt from their visor. Jason, aiming his laser rifle right at them, he pulled the trigger, raking the floor with spikes of light. Drew writhed away, dodging the firestorm. They scrambled to their feet and fled. Drew looked up at the flag high on a platform above. All they had to do was take it and get it back to their four idiots. Drew couldn't believe they had let them get this close. Drew sped up. Both Jason and Shiv were on their tail, spinning around Nick Drew's leg. The holographic NFT armor plate on their thigh shattered into pixels. The shock pads in their bone suits sent them stumbling to the floor again, but they were still in the game. Just Shiv rushed at Drew, roaring, spinning the ballistic mace. Drew felt their heart in their throat, even though it wasn't real, a weapon that big would send a serious jolt through their bone suit. Then relief washed over Drew as they looked past Shiv's massive frame. Carlos dropped onto Shiv's shoulders from the platform above, ventilating them with bullets as he landed, driving the butt of his gun into their helmet. Carl offered Broadside's S-Home V. Drew scrambled to their feet as Shiv crashed down like a building being demolished. Carlos laid down cover fire behind Drew as they ran forward. They couldn't believe they were about to do this. Drew and Carlos working together as a team. It felt like they were about to snatch $1 billion out of the sky. Drew broke into a sprint and jumped high in the air, bouncing off the side of a platform, stretching out an arm, and skeleton crew has the flag. Carlos stood over Shiv. Riz was behind him. They cheered, high-fiving each other. Drew looked back, smiling through their visor. They couldn't remember being happier than this. V-boom. The explosion blotted out everything. Jason rockets Ronzi. G5 rockets call out there. Double kill. Drew watched Riz and Carlos fly through the words in the air. Jason barreled through the smoke towards Drew, holding a garish-looking rocket launcher, smiling and nodding ominously. Drew felt a sting as something from the other direction